Imagine you're stepping back in time, thousands of years, feeling that warm sun on your face, watching a craftsman shape a piece of clay. But he has no idea his creation is going to hold a secret for over 12,000 years.
A secret.
Yeah, a cat's paw print. Just a little connection to the past. And that's just one of the incredible stories we're going to unearth today as we dive into some of the most fascinating discoveries of late 2024.
Oh, yeah. From sunken treasures to hidden masterpieces, ancient recipes and secret messages, it's like these finds open a window into the lives and the beliefs and the innovations of those who came before us. It's pretty cool.
So we'll start with some updates on stories we've talked about before. Remember that sonar imaging that had everyone so excited about maybe finding Amelia Earhart's plane?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. What happened?
Well, turns out those hopes were dashed. It was just rocks.
Oh, just rocks mimicking the shape of a plane.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good reminder, though, right? That the search for historical answers is often full of twists and turns.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the most promising leads lead to, well, just rocks.
But hey, on a more glamorous note, those ruby slippers, the ones that brought Dorothy back to Kansas, those were auctioned off for a record $28 million.
Wow, $28 million.
Yeah.
Sadly, though, the Judy Garland Museum, they couldn't afford to buy them back and bring them back to Kansas.
Oh, it's really sad.
You know, it really does highlight the challenges of preserving historical artifacts, especially when they get to such crazy values like that.
Speaking of treasures, the Terracotta Army just keeps on amazing,
Yeah.
with archaeologists digging up a high-ranking military officer,
Oh, wow.
one of only 10 ever found.
This is a big deal. This isn't just another soldier, you know. This officer's position in the formation, his armor, weaponry, it could all give us clues about military tactics and how they changed during this period. It shows that even sites we think we know well, like the Terracotta Army, can still surprise us.
From ancient armies to legendary predators. You remember those man-eating lions of Tsavo, the ghost in the darkness?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
New research analyzing the hair they found trapped in their teeth has debunked a long-held theory.
Really, what was the theory?
For years, people thought they mainly ate soft tissue because of dental problems.
Interesting.
But now this evidence suggests that they were actually pretty adaptable hunters.
So they ate what was available.
Exactly. And sometimes what was available was, well, humans.
Oh, wow.
Moving from the savannah to medieval art, we have an update on the Bayeux Tapestry. A French artist is going to be adding in a part that's missing, a depiction of William the Conqueror's coronation.
Filling in the gaps, huh?
Yeah.
So they're not trying to copy the original style. It'll be like a modern interpretation added to this ancient tapestry. Very interesting.
And of course, Pompeii never fails to deliver when it comes to new discoveries.
Oh, what have they found now?
They found a tiny house, a structure way smaller than those grand villas Pompeii is known for.
Uh-huh.
But get this, it's covered with, like, bright and vibrant frescoes. They show scenes from mythology, which suggests that even simple dwellings were decorated with some pretty incredible artwork.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the people who lived there?
All right, like, did they dream of owning a villa someday? Or were they happy in their, like, small, art-filled homes?
It really takes you beyond the physical remains, right? And into people's hopes and dreams and how they lived. And, you know, speaking of how they lived, new DNA analysis from Pompeii is challenging what we thought about families back then.
It's more than just those plaster casts. They did DNA analysis and found out that a group that we always thought was a family, based on where they were when the volcano erupted, well, they weren't actually related at all.
Wow.
And even more interesting, this pair that everyone assumed was a mother and child from how they were posed, well, they turned out to be an unrelated man and a child.
Makes you wonder if we're imposing our modern ideas about family onto the past, doesn't it?
I think so. Maybe they had different ways of forming bonds and connections.
It reminds us that the past was just as complicated and nuanced as the present.
And you know, we always thought we had the Pompeii eruption figured out. Turns out we might not.
Oh, really? What's changed?
New research is saying that the date we've used for years, August 24th, 79 AD, might be wrong.
Really?
Yeah, they think it could have happened later, maybe even October.
Yeah.
And that throws a whole new wrench into what we know about the lead up to the eruption.
Wow, so much for settled history.
Right. And speaking of dramatic events, over in Paris, part of a wall collapsed in the catacombs.
Oh, no. Was anyone hurt?
No, no one was hurt. But it's given us this unexpected peek into the lives and deaths of Parisians from centuries ago.
It's a little grim, but when you analyze the bones for injuries, diseases, malnutrition, It can tell you so much about how people lived and died back then.
Fascinating and a little bit spooky.
Yeah. It's a good reminder, though. Our bodies hold stories, even in death.
Okay, so from the depths of the catacombs, let's head to the Antarctic, to Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance.
The Endurance, what about it?
Well, they did a new 3D scan of the wreck.
Ah,
It's incredibly well preserved even after being under the ice for a century.
real?
Yeah, they can see everyday items like boots and cooking utensils, even navigation instruments. It's like stepping back in time. You can really imagine what it was like to be one of those explorers facing those brutal Antarctic conditions.
It's amazing what survives.
From polar exploration to the world of computers, did you know they found 4 of Ada Lovelace's letters that were misfiled?
Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer.
Exactly, and these letters give us a glimpse into the struggle she faced as a woman in a field dominated by men.
I can imagine it wasn't easy.
It's so interesting, though, because in these letters, she actually downplays her expertise, even while she's talking about all these complex math and science concepts.
Wow. So she's clearly brilliant, but also having to be humble in a way
Right.
because of the social pressures at the time.
Exactly. And finally, new research about Stonehenge suggests that it wasn't just a place for ceremonies. The stones used to build it came from all over Great Britain,
Really?
which is leading some researchers to think it was a symbol of unity, like bringing different communities together.
That's fascinating. Think of the effort it would have taken to move those massive stones all that way. It speaks to a shared purpose.
And maybe even a shared belief system.
And on a more somber note, there's been some new developments concerning the boarding schools for Indigenous children. Investigations have found the death toll was much higher than we thought, more than 3,000 children.
It's heartbreaking to hear that.
Thankfully, there's an oral history project going on, led by Indigenous communities to accord the stories of those who survived and promote healing. It's crucial to acknowledge this painful past and make sure nothing like it ever happens again.
Absolutely. And now let's dive into the world of shipwrecks. We have a ton of discoveries to uncover.
Shipwrecks, I love it. Let's go. It's like they're time capsules, aren't they? Scattered across the ocean floor, preserving little pieces of history, trade routes, even the everyday lives of sailors and passengers.
Yeah. Our first stop is Lake Huron. Researchers there located the John Evanson. It's a wooden tugboat that sank back in 1895.
The John Evanson.
And get this, they found it in just a few minutes on the very first day they were searching.
Wow, that's amazing.
You know, right?
It shows you how powerful it can be when you combine historical research with today's technology.
Yeah, they used old newspaper accounts to figure out where to look. Turns out those accounts were incredibly accurate.
Wow.
From a tugboat in a lake, we go to a submarine lost in the ocean. The HMS Trooper, a British submarine, it disappeared during World War II. They finally found it off the coast of Greece.
That's got to be a tough discovery.
It is. The wreck is considered a war grave, so they're going to leave it undisturbed.
Yeah, it's a reminder of the sacrifices people made during war.
And the importance of respecting those final resting places.
Absolutely.
But shipwrecks aren't always about big historical events or somber reminders of the past. Sometimes they give us these unexpected insights into, like, human biology.
Oh, like what?
So they were analyzing skeletal remains from the Mary Rose, that famous Tudor warship, and they found a possible link between whether someone was right-handed or left-handed and the chemical composition of their bones.
No way. That's incredible.
I know, right? It could actually have a big impact on forensic science and maybe even how we understand human evolution.
Imagine being able to figure out if someone was right-handed or left-handed just by looking at their bones.
That's wild. And speaking of uncovering secrets, divers off the coast of Sicily have been exploring this 2,000-year-old shipwreck. It's partly buried in sand, but what they can see is a bunch of ceramic vessels. Many of them are still stacked the way they were when the ship went down.
Wow, that's got to be a sight to see.
They think those vessels came from the Aeolian Islands, which gives us a glimpse into these old trade routes across the Mediterranean, like a snapshot of that moment frozen in time.
Yeah.
It's amazing what can survive underwater for so long.
Oh, I know, like those onion bottles they found?
From the Spanish shipwreck.
Yes.
Conservators actually restored 2 of those bottles. So delicate.
They were a popular design back in the 18th century. Those bottles with that bulbous shape. It's fascinating to think about the people who made them, the techniques and the skills they used.
And speaking of epic journeys, there's this shipwreck Off the coast of Kenya, they think it might be from Vasco da Gama's last voyage.
Vasco da Gama, the one who opened up the sea route to India.
The one and only.
If it is his ship, can you imagine the stories those timbers could tell? His voyages changed global trade and exploration.
Shifting gears a bit, researchers in Northern Ireland have been busy identifying shipwrecks.
Oh, like what?
They think they found the HMS Stephen Furness, sunk by a German torpedo back in 1917. They're using a combination of sonar scans and old records to piece together the stories of all these lost ships.
It's like being a detective, but for the sea.
It's not just about naval history, though. It's about remembering the human stories behind these shipwrecks.
For sure. And it sounds like there's hope for preserving these wooden treasures.
Oh, you mean the new technique they developed with the hydrogels?
Yeah. It could be huge for shipwreck conservation. Imagine being able to preserve those pieces of history for, future generations.
It's incredible. Okay, so from the ocean depths to hidden masterpieces. Ready to explore some art discoveries.
Oh, always. Art, it's like this window into creativity, different cultures, different times. And these new discoveries are sure to get anyone excited, anyone who appreciates beauty, history, the power of human expression.
Okay, so picture this. A family in Italy, they have this painting for years. They have no idea how much it's really worth. Then art experts take a look and say, it's a possible lost Picasso.
Ooh, Picasso hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. The story of how this painting went unnoticed for so long is almost as interesting as the painting itself.
It makes you wonder how many other masterpieces are out there, just waiting to be discovered in attics and basements.
And sometimes it's not about those big, expensive masterpieces. Sometimes it's about finding the hidden stories within art we already know.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like that family portrait from 1739.
The one where they recently found the young black child in the background.
Yes.
He was a paid servant. His name was James Cumberledge.
James Cumberledge.
And because his last name is so unique, historians have actually been able to learn a lot about his life.
It's incredible how one little detail can lead to a whole story. His story adds so much to what we know about race and class in 18th century Britain.
Speaking of uncovering hidden things, they found a collection of engravings by a young William Blake.
Wow, William Blake, the visionary artist.
The one and only. And these engravings give us a peek into how his style developed over time.
It's like we're looking over his shoulder as he's creating.
And even those masterpieces we think we know well can surprise us.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
They did an X-ray analysis of Paul Gauguin's The Little Cat.
And they found...
Trimmed the canvas. And there's a beetle embedded in the paint.
Yep.
Just a funny little detail that makes you realize that even those super famous paintings are full of little surprises. And over in Greece, archaeologists think they found a portrait of Constantine of Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor. And they think it might have been painted while he was alive.
A portrait from life.
That's what they think. It would be incredible to see the face of this historical figure.
It would be like looking into the past, face to face with the last emperor of a lost empire.
And talk about hidden beauty. At Boston's Old North Church, they were doing some restorations, and guess what they found?
What?
Murals of angels. They were hidden under layers of paint for over a century.
Wow.
They think these angels were painted in the early 18th century. They give us a glimpse into how the church looked back then, the art and design of colonial America.
It's like a time capsule of colonial art.
And finally, some research from Finland suggests that prehistoric rock art wasn't just about the visuals.
Really? What else was it about?
They think the artists considered the acoustics, the sounds of the environment when they placed their paintings.
So it was like an immersive experience.
Exactly. Not just looking at the art, but hearing it too. The echoes, the sounds of the space.
Wow.
So these ancient artists were kind of like sound designers too. It makes you wonder how sound played a role in those old rituals and stories. Speaking of stories, we have a whole bunch of fascinating discoveries that don't really fit into any neat categories. It's time for our potpourri of discoveries.
Get ready. We're going on a whirlwind tour of finds, from Viking voyages to hidden trapdoors, ancient shoes, even musical manuscripts. This segment really shows the variety of the human experience and all the surprises waiting for us when we look into the past.
Okay, first up, that's going to make you smile. Archaeologists in Jerusalem. They found this pottery shard. It's 12,000 years old.
Wow, 12,000 years old? What's so special about it?
It has perfectly preserved cat paw prints on it,
Cat paw prints.
complete with those little claw marks.
Oh, some things never change, huh?
Right. A cat's love for a warm, soft surface. I guess that's timeless. And speaking of time, they did some DNA analysis of walrus ivory from the Viking era.
Walrus ivory.
Turns out those Vikings were going farther north than we thought, way up into the Arctic.
Wow, farther north.
They might have even had contact with Inuit people in the Arctic way earlier than we believed.
Interesting.
And for all the music lovers out there, get this. They found a waltz by Chopin, a previously unknown waltz.
No way. Where did they find it?
It was at the Morgan Library and Museum, just this short little piece, handwritten on a card, but it adds to Chopin's legacy and gives us a glimpse into how he worked.
It's amazing what turns up, isn't it?
And sometimes what turns up changes what we thought we knew. Like with that skeleton they found in a Norwegian castle. Well,
What about it?
they always assumed this person was defending the castle, but when they did DNA analysis and looked at the bones more closely, it looks like they might have been an attacker.
That flips the script.
It shows you that history is always being reinterpreted. New evidence pops up, and we have to rethink what we thought we knew. And speaking of hidden things, they found a secret trapdoor in Athens.
A trap door.
Yeah. And it led to a storage area full of ancient artifacts. Figurines, vessels, tons of coins.
It sounds like something out of an adventure movie.
It makes you wonder how it stayed hidden for so long. And what else might be hidden under our modern cities?
I know, right?
You know, sometimes even ordinary things can tell us amazing stories about the past. Like, they found a wooden shoe in the Netherlands. It's from the 15th century.
A wooden shoe, okay.
What's interesting is that it's made from birchwood, which isn't native to that area.
So it came from somewhere else.
Exactly. It tells us about trade routes and how fashion trends were spreading across Europe, even back then. And remember that big news story about the tomb they found under Petra's treasury?
Oh yeah, that was everywhere.
It's a pretty significant find, as to the history of Petra. It has multiple skeletons and artifacts, so it's probably a pretty important tomb. Okay, now let's talk about food.
Food! My favorite subject.
Researchers in Tunisia, they found cooked snails that are over 7,700 years old.
7,700 years ago. That's ancient.
Some of them still have the epiphragm intact, that membrane that seals the snail's shell, which means they had pretty sophisticated ways of preserving food back then. And get this, in Australia, research shows that the Martu people have been shaping the landscape with plants for centuries, way before modern agriculture came along.
That's really interesting. It changes how we think about the impact humans have on the environment.
And it's not just Australia. In British Columbia, they found evidence that indigenous people were planting and moving hazelnut trees for over 7,000 years ago.
7,000 years. So they were actively managing the land and its resources much earlier than we thought.
Now let's talk about bread. They analyzed these husking trays from Mesopotamia, and they think they were used to bake flatbreads, maybe seasoned with some oil or fat.
Like a kind of focaccia.
Yeah, it gives you this picture of what people were eating thousands of years ago. And in Germany, they actually found a bakery. It's 2,800 years old, with bread and tools still inside.
A bakery frozen in time. Amazing.
But bread wasn't the only thing on the menu. They found evidence on the island of Funen in Denmark that people were eating grains, but not for making bread. They think maybe they were making porridge or gruel.
So there was variety in their diet. It wasn't all just bread.
Exactly. Okay, this next one is a cool blend of history and science. They took some rye that was recovered from a shipwreck in Lake Huron,
Rye from a shipwreck.
and they're using it to make whiskey.
Wow. What a story that whiskey will have. It could also bring back a type of rye that was once really important to Michigan.
Okay, get this. Archaeologists in China found evidence of rice beer that's 10,000 years old.
10,000 years. That's incredible.
It pushes back the timeline for fermented drinks in East Asia. And speaking of fermentation, they also found a bronze vessel in a 2,000-year-old tomb. They think it was used to distill wine.
Distilling wine, that's pretty advanced.
It shows how these technologies have a really long history. Now, you know how peaches are a big part of southern food in the U.S.? Well, it wasn't just European colonists who brought peaches to the South.
Oh, really?
Indigenous peoples were growing and spreading peach trees in the Southeast long before the colonists arrived. And archaeologists found a 2,000-year-old fig in Ireland.
A fig.
It was at an old trading post. It's a little bit piece of evidence that shows how connected the ancient world was. Trade routes stretching all the way from the Roman Empire to Ireland. And at Oxford University, they found the original kitchen of Oriel College. The college was founded in 1326.
Wow, the original kitchen. That must be a special discovery for them.
It's like we can almost imagine what it was like back then. The smells, the sounds, all the activity in that kitchen. From ancient kitchens to ancient writing, we have a bunch of discoveries that shed light on books, letters, and how people communicated in the past.
It's fascinating how humans have always wanted to communicate, to tell stories, and leave a record of their existence.
So in Turkey, they found a 2,000-year-old inscription. It honors a champion wrestler named Solanos.
Philonos the champion.
It tells us about ancient sports and how people celebrated athletic achievements back then. And for all you Bram Stoker fans out there, they found a short story he wrote that no one knew about. It's called Gibbet Hill.
A lost Bram Stoker story. That's got to be exciting for his fans.
And the British Library was getting ready for an exhibit on the voices of medieval women, and they found a page from a manuscript, a 14th century manuscript. It was made by the Poor Clares of Cologne. It gives us a better understanding of women's roles in religious communities back then.
That's a valuable find.
And researchers were studying two quipus, those knotted cords that Andean people used to keep records. It seems one quipu is actually a summary of the other one.
So they had pretty complex ways of organizing and managing information.
Yeah. And remember that message in a bottle from the archaeologist in 1825? Well, they found another one. This one was left by a Norwegian archaeologist in the 19th century at the site of a Viking ship burial.
Another message in a bottle. What did it say?
It has notes and some artifacts. It tells us about how archaeology was done back then. And there's another one, this time from a Scottish lighthouse. Engineers left it in 1892 when they installed a new lens. Over 100 years later, other engineers working on the same lens found the bottle.
A connection across time. How cool.
And there's this inscription in Turkey that no one could figure out. But a historian thinks he's finally cracked the code. He believes it's dedicated to a Phrygian mother goddess.
Wow, that could change what we know about the Phrygians.
At the Tower of London, they used some high-tech imaging to read graffiti that was too faded to see before. There were messages left by prisoners from centuries ago. It's a powerful reminder that history is often told from the point of view of the winners.
Right, those prisoners didn't have a voice, but their messages on the walls survived.
They also found a tiny silver scroll. It has a prayer for protection on it, and they think it might be the oldest proof of Christianity in Northern Europe.
From a time when Christianity was still new.
And get this, they're looking at those slate plaques from ancient Iberia, the ones with all the geometric patterns. They used to think they were just decorative. But now they're thinking those patterns might be genealogical records.
So they could tell us about family history and social structures back then? That's amazing.
And this last one is huge. In Syria, they found clay cylinders with etchings on them. They could be the earliest example of an alphabet, from 2400 BC.
That's 500 years earlier than what we thought was the oldest alphabet. It could completely change our understanding of how writing developed.
And to wrap things up, we have a few projects where researchers are recreating ancient weapons, putting them to the test to see how they worked.
Experimental archaeology. It's a hands-on way to learn about the past.
So they made replicas of prehistoric spears and shields to see the wear patterns and understand how people fought. And they also tested javelins and atlatls to see if having the high ground really did make a difference in combat.
It's all about bringing the past to life, not just through objects, but through action.
And finally, they looked at two Aboriginal weapons from Australia, a club called a lingal and an axe called a quoich. They wanted to understand how those weapons worked, the power and the technique involved.
Wow, what a journey. We've covered everything from cat paw prints to lost Picassos, ancient breweries, and even the very beginnings of writing.
It shows you the power of curiosity and how much there's still left to discover.
Every one of these finds, big or small, adds another piece to the puzzle of our past.
So what can we take away from all this? What can we learn from these glimpses into the past?
I think it's a reminder that history is alive. It's constantly being reshaped as we find new evidence. These discoveries challenge what we thought we knew, and they connect us to those who came before us.
It's incredible to think how many stories are still waiting to be told, all those secrets buried beneath our feet. It's exciting to imagine what we might find in the future. That's what makes archaeology so captivating. The mystery, the potential to rewrite history, and the realization that the past isn't lost as long as we keep searching for it.